Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well and had a good evening. Welcome to lesson 6. This is our sixth lesson. It's the asynchronous lesson for this week. We're going to do three things in this lesson. I'm going to try and keep it as brief as I can for you. This is just an introduction to the lesson. I do a quick reflection on lesson 5, talk a little bit about what happened in class and how Adobe decided not to work anymore. We're also going to shift the focus for this week onto preparing for your web-based learning object check-in and proposals. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I've posted some supplementary content at the bottom of the page here. None of this is required necessarily, but I know that there's been a lot of good sharing of resources, so I'm happy to continue that trend as we move forward. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Now, the first thing I want to start off with was an apology on Adobe. I'm calling it Disconnect. It's no longer Adobe Connect. It's now Adobe Disconnect. Basically what happened, and you can see there's a video that I've posted here. There's a video inside of a video. This is a video's recording of what was happening to my screen. I was in Adobe Connect and I was going in between the breakout rooms and all was well, and then it kind of froze. So I logged out of Adobe Connect and tried to get back in. That's what you can see on the screen right now. And it just wouldn't reconnect for me. So this was something that initially I thought might have been something with my computer, but I was able to connect with some people through Google Hangouts, and I noticed through those discussions that it was also happening to a few other people. So I'm not really sure what happened. It might have been something with the server, but I do apologize for kind of the way that class ended. And the fact that some people were in limbo in Adobe in the breakout rooms but couldn't get out of it, communicating with other people through Google Hangouts. So it was definitely a challenge. Now, I was able to meet with a few students after class in Google Hangouts, so I felt like that was good. But I just want to say a quick, again, apologies for that occurring. I have submitted a ticket to IT for them to investigate, and hopefully it will be resolved before our next class. If there are any issues going into our next class, then I will definitely send a message out to the group and let people know. In the future, if anything is to happen like this again, I would just suggest you check Twitter, the course site, and emails. Those are the three channels that I use to try and communicate that I wasn't able to get back into the Adobe Connect room. And hopefully nobody was in there too long by themselves, trying to wonder where I was, or where everybody else was, for that matter. The other thing that goes along with this, unfortunately, I had started a recording for the Adobe Connect session, but unfortunately, because I got disconnected and I couldn't go back in, I don't believe that the recording worked. I'm going to double check and verify that, and if there is a recording, I will post it on the Lesson 5 web page, but at this stage I don't think the recording is available, so I do apologize for that. Now, because we got disconnected a little bit earlier, I wanted to kind of touch in with people and provide a little bit of a reflection or a wrap-up on the activity of identifying criteria for evaluating web-based learning objects. And the first thing that I wanted to mention was, as I was listening to the conversations and looking at the criteria that people had established, I wanted to emphasize the importance of criteria being observable and measurable. And so if we have an element that is not observable and not measurable, then it becomes something that's difficult to assess or evaluate. So one example that I think a few people came up with in their discussions was the idea of accessibility and ease of use. So to me, these are two key criteria that can be observed and they can be measured. Now, how you measure it, whether or not you use a 5-point Likert scale or some other, leveling system, you need to be able to identify this was either, if I take ease of use as an example, something is either going to be very easy to use, somewhat easy to use, or not easy to use. And then there might be another category which is completely not user-friendly at all. So being able to have a criteria that's observable and measurable is important. Now, I did notice that a lot of the groups focused on accessibility and ease of use, so that's why I use that as an example. And so when we're looking at tools, or when you're evaluating your own tools, it's a good idea to take a look at what are some criteria for evaluating those tools. And to help you with that, this was an exploratory activity. And I've also posted underneath the video here a link to a reading that talks about criteria for evaluating web-based tools. So what I would encourage you to do is kind of take a look at the criteria that you came up with as a group compared to the criteria that's in the reading, and see if there's some overlap, and perhaps some additional items that you might not have encountered in your discussion. The other thing that I wanted to mention in terms of the discussions is that it's very apparent to me by listening to some of the discussions that the learning is definitely in the doing. And I want to share a couple of quotes that I overheard kind of when I popped into a couple of the breakout rooms. So the first one is I went into a breakout room, and I think I caught the tail end of a sentence here where one of the group members was saying we should have come up with a better criteria, because what happened with this group is they developed their criteria. Then they went back and tried to use that criteria to evaluate the web-based learning objects, and then they realized that they didn't have enough criteria, or they were missing some aspects of it. So to me, that's really important learning, and that's totally fine. This activity wasn't about coming up with the perfect list of criteria. It was more about starting to think about what are some of the criteria that need to exist in a web-based learning object, and then how would you evaluate that if you were trying to design a web-based learning object for your learners. Another quote that kind of came from one of the groups that I really appreciated was one group said, why don't we just try it and see what happens? So the idea of let's just develop our criteria and then try it and see what happens. And so these were actually two different groups, and so I think that kind of mindset is the one that I want to encourage for the remainder of the course, is just try things. Don't be afraid to try things, and the first time that you do something, it's not going to be perfect. You are going to make some mistakes, and that goes for the web-based learning object as well. So transitioning to the web-based learning object check-in form, I wanted to follow up on what we had talked about in class. I had shown you a Word version of the form. So I have provided a link to the form on this page. You can find it underneath the video, this video, and you'll be able to download it. So there's basically three steps. First is you download the document. The second step is that you fill in each section, and then the third step is once you've completed that, you can save it as a PDF or as a Word document. I'm not going to be particular with our format. I just I want it to work as easily as it can for people, and then I'm going to ask you to upload it to the Dropbox in Blackboard. So that's kind of the steps in terms of the process. Now, the other thing that came up in our discussion is, and I kind of sensed, my sense is that people are feeling a little bit overwhelmed is not really the right word, but there's definitely a lot to do, and the constrained time frame for the course puts pressure on us to kind of get a lot of stuff done in a short period of time. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to look at revising the submission date. Actually, I'm not looking at it. I'm going to revise the submission date to give you more time. So, and I've created an animation to make this more dramatic. Dun, dun, dun. I should add a music. I should be using Adobe Voice. Nick, can you help me? Anyway, so I've revised the submission date to Sunday, May 31st. Anytime Sunday, May 31st before 11:59 p.m. And I'm going to make that change in the Blackboard Dropbox. So if you want to submit your check-in form report early, then you're more than welcome to do that if that fits with your schedule. But if you feel like you need a little bit more time, then hopefully the extra 4 or 5 days might provide you with a little bit more of an opportunity to feel more comfortable with the assignment. Again, I want to emphasize that this is just a check-in proposal, so the idea is we're just looking at where you are in your process and understanding that you do have to be at some level of the process, but I want you to focus on that. The other thing, because I'm aware of the work that is involved in developing this, I'm not adding any content to the rest of this online lesson. So you'll see that there's no readings that are required, there's no videos that are required. Everything is going to be in the supplementary materials, and these are just things that are designed to help you a little bit. I do want to wrap up by talking about the check-in mini presentations, and I want to emphasize again, these are mini presentations. As I mentioned last class, we're going to have about an hour, 60 minutes for presentations, and you'll be working in breakout sessions. Hopefully they'll work this time. So you're going to have 4 to 5 people in each breakout session. And so you have to kind of allot your time appropriately in that regard. So about a 10-minute presentation with, a couple of minutes for feedback. So that'll become more clear when we meet next class, but just want to give you a heads up on that. A review of what we talked about in yesterday's class is what you're essentially doing is giving us an overview of the concept that you're going to be looking at, what goals you're hoping to achieve with your learning object, and also importantly, how you will assess whether or not you've met those goals, and then a little bit of an overview of the technology you're going to be using for the learning object, and then how are you going to know whether or not that learning object is effective. So we're looking at both the platform that you're using in addition to the tools that you're using and the mechanisms that you have in place for assessing the effectiveness of your tool. So I'm going to wrap up just with a final note saying, I really appreciate all of the work that everyone is contributing to the course. I'm also sensitive to the fact that it is a lot of work. So that's why I'm kind of, it's definitely not a week off, but I'm not adding any additional content, as I said, in terms of videos or readings that are required for this week, because I know that your focus is going to be on working on your check-in proposal forms and preparing your mini presentations. So for next class, we'll be doing the check-in presentations for about an hour, and then we'll be doing an intro to instructional design principles, and I have a little activity that will take up some of the rest of the class. So if you have any questions relating to any of this content, please feel free to post a comment at the bottom of the page, and I look forward to seeing you all next Tuesday.